Alright guys, this is our first official section of notes over chapter 51 in your textbook, Animal Behavior. So we're going to try to get through this pretty quickly simply because there's a lot of information, and I promised you that these presentations or these lectures would only be 15 minutes. So hopefully we can get through this pretty quickly. These are the things that you should be able to do or know by the end of this lecture. A student will be able to know how behaviors are the result of natural selection, and then also you should be able to compare and contrast innate and learned behaviors among some other things that we'll be discussing in class. So, quick intro to animal behavior. Ethology is the study of animal behavior. So, if you ever want to focus on any particular animal, you will be an ethologist. So, you can be a chimpanzee ethologist. You can be a ladybug ethologist. So, and then what behavior is it's what an animal does and how it does it. And behavior is what's going to drive almost all of our ecological processes and drive population changes, and then it'll also drive evolution. So behavior will have both genetic and environmental factors. We've seen climate change have had an impact on behaviors of animals, but a lot of behaviors are going to be something that it is predispositioned. It's in the DNA. So it is something that has evolved and changed throughout time, but it is essential for survival and reproduction. And as said, it's subject to natural selection over time. So survival of the fittest, the organisms that have the best behavior are going to be the ones that survive. So understanding behavior, there's two causes. There's proximate and ultimate. Proximate is going to be how the behavior occurs or how it's modified. An example of this would be down here we have East Asian red-crowned cranes. They will do a very elaborate dance to try to get a mate. So that is, the how is the dancing. The why, the ultimate cause, is what is its end game. The end game is to try to get a mate so that they can reproduce and survival of the fittest. If their dance is not cool enough, where the female basically takes the bait, then that male his offspring will not survive. He will not have any offspring, and his dance or his proximate cause will die out. Innate behaviors are going to be, so innate just means like internal. It's something that it's not learned, it's just there. You can't help it. So a fixed action pattern is a type of innate behavior, and essentially, again, it's something that is triggered by what's called a sign stimulus, which just basically means there's a trigger. There's something that happens that causes you to react in a way that you just can't control. An example of this would be if you've ever had one of those, like, it's a fake pack of gum and you pull on the gum and it shocks you. Your reaction to that is a fixed action pattern. Okay. You can't, it just happens. Okay. So what an FAP will do is it will ensure that activities that are essential to survival are performed correctly and that you don't have to practice it. You just automatically know. So unlike driving a car where you have to practice, an FAP is going to be something that you already know. It's in your body. Another example of this would be childbirth. So when a woman is giving birth, she just knows, like, you just know what to do. And that just helps ensure survival of the offspring. The example here is the goose and egg. The reason that this is an example is actually geese, if their egg rolls away, the goose will automatically go back after it and roll it to their nest. This is not something that this goose has actually ever seen happen. It's not something that it had to learn from its mother. It just knows if the egg rolls away, it's going to go get it. Sign stimuli. So this is another example of the sign stimuli. These fish, just let me double check here. The stickleback fish, there we go. If a fish comes around and it doesn't necessarily have to look like a stickleback fish, if it just has the red underbelly, that is a sign stimuli to the male sticklefish to attack that thing. So it's another FAP. They didn't have to learn how to do that. It just happens. So if any, even if it's this ridiculous triangle shape, if it comes near its nest and it has this red underbelly, doesn't look anything else like a fish, it will attack it. And if you have another organism or another, even a fake fish or a model, there we go, and it does not have the red underbelly, but it looks identical without the coloration, the stickleback fish will ignore it. It'll leave it alone. So that's a sign, stimuli, and an FAP. Directed movements are going to be how movements can stimulate or how movements can ensure animal behavior to survive in the environment. So kinesis is going to be just a simple change in movement. So just changing your direction, whereas taxis is going to be something, it's like your orientation. Okay, so kinesis is going to be the change in direction. Taxis is orientation. Migration is another example. Migration is just a regular long distance change, so it's something that happens typically every year or twice a year. There are environmental cues, which include things like the weather, it'll include the magnetic field, it'll include the sun, the stars, it'll include landmarks. So the sandhill cranes are an example of that. Every summer, early fall, they will actually migrate from Canada down to Texas, and on the way they will actually pass through Kearney, Nebraska, and it's one of the bigger migration patterns, and it's actually one of the most studied migration patterns ever seen. So circadian rhythm, this is the difference between something being nocturnal and diurnal. So nocturnal means that it's going to be very active at night. Diurnal means it's going to be active during the day. And then plants actually have two types of circadian rhythms, or their internal clock. There's one that's reactive to light and one that's reactive to temperature. This is a list of signals. So these are going to be triggers that they don't necessarily have to be anything visual. They don't have to be anything touch. They can be, but it can be pheromones. So pheromones are going to be that it's like a smell that organisms will give off, especially during times of mating. And then there's also auditory signals along with tactile and visual, so touch and seeing something. And we'll talk about fruit flies when we do that lab. Learned behaviors, it's exactly like it sounds. It is something that is learned. So there are some examples here of learned behaviors that we're going to go into a little bit more detail with. So the first one, habituation wasn't on the last one, but habituation, it's exactly like it sounds. It's a habit. And best way to describe this is though people who use narcotics or drugs, the first time they use that drug, the effect is going to be really great. And then the next time they use it, the effect is going to be a little less. And then the next time they use it, it's going to be a little less, and so on. So that's their habituation. They have lost that responsiveness. And so it's not necessarily for survival. It's habituation is typically something that's going to take place that is for pleasure. Okay, and it's simple. Imprinting it happens typically during a young organism's life. Good example of this would be the gray lag geese. Let's see there. There was a movie inspired by this called oh my gosh, Wayward Home or something like that. But it's a girl and she has this plane and she's this duck imprinted, or this crane imprinted on her. So this is imprinting, and typically, again, it happens when the organism is young, and it'll imprint on its mother. So whether or not it's its actual mother, or it can imprint on a human, which is the picture here on the last slide. This man, Lorenz, he had these young ducklings, or excuse me, geeslings, imprint on him, and then they would follow him like a mother duck. So that's imprinting. It's learning and it's innate. They know internally they need to follow something, but they learn who to follow. Spatial learning is going to be the use of space and your surroundings. So a cognitive map is going to be like an internal map where you just kind of know where to go based on previous experiences. Landmarks are another way. So here was this is an example. So a hornet's nest. The experiment was placing the nest in the middle of a circle of pine cones, and once they took the nest, or they moved the pine cones away from where the nest is, but the hornet still went to the middle of the pine cones because he was using the landmark. Associative learning, to associate means to like cause and effect. So an example of this would be monarch butterflies don't taste very good. So this bird would associate these monarch butterflies with a foul taste or with vomiting. And so that's how other organisms will use that type of camouflage or that type of pattern to ensure survival. Even though it's not a monarch butterfly and it doesn't taste bad, to the bird it does. Classical conditioning is like Pavlov. You ring a bell, give the dog food, eventually you take the food away and you ring the bell and they'll still salivate. Operant conditioning is trial and error. So an example down here is this wolf who has basically little barbs sticking out of his head. He trial and errored. He tried to do something, he got hurt, and hopefully he learns that that hurts and he won't do it again. Cognition is just the act of problem solving. This was something that was huge to researchers who were initially studying chimpanzees and gorillas, that they could use tools for the first time. And that was because it showed that these organisms had a greater thinking. Crows are another organism that are actually really intelligent. They will also do a type of imprinting on anything that treats any of its members wrong. So if you ever like try to throw a rock at a crow, it will actually go get more crows and it will come after you. So it's a type of cognition, problem solving, but it is also a type of imprinting because it actually like imprints on you so that they don't forget who you are. Social learning occurs by just observing others. So vervet monkeys, they have a series of alarms and they just learn that from generation to generation. All right, foraging is for food. It minimizes the costs but maximizes the benefits, so you don't have to use a lot of energy to forage for food, but you're still getting those nutrients, you're still getting that the consumption. All right, last thing that we're going to talk about here is sexual selection. This is seeking and getting mates and then choosing and competing for mates. So a couple of things to learn here. If an organism is promiscuous, it will have many partners with no care. So they don't care about what their partner is or anything like that. Monogamous is one partner with a lot of care. So like a marriage, you care a lot about your partner. Polygamous means that you are going to have one male and many females. Polyandry is one female and many males. Okay, if it's polyandry, the female will be showy. If it's polygamous, the male will be showy. So like a peacock is a showy male. Here are just some examples. Okay. Trying to think here. Last kind of thing, this last slide, we don't have to spend too much time, but this one, agnostic behavior, that's going to be your rituals. So that's going to be especially fighting and combat over mates. So these polar bears are fighting, these kangaroos are fighting. 99% of the time, agnostic behavior is going to happen for mating. Okay. There are a couple of examples of agnostic behavior that occurs not for mating, but we will have to talk about that in class. Don't worry too much about altruism or inclusive fitness or kin selection. We will talk about that in class. If you have any questions, as always, please email me. And if you don't have any questions, then I will see you in class when we begin to go over animal behavior. Have a good week.